Let us continue from where we left off. We're going to read the next chapter of this book. It's called Bound to Blood and Moonlight. It's a good Werewolf Billionaire romance. As always, I read for you, and you enjoy the plot. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Let us read. Chapter 7. Files That Weren't There. The archive console sat dark and inert, exactly as a secured terminal was meant to be. Liora pulled the old swivel chair closer and leaned in. Her pulse was still unsettled from Damian's abrupt withdrawal. The room felt too quiet, not peaceful, the kind of silence that pressed inward. On impulse, she placed her fingertips on the terminal pad, right where the power indicator should have been. Nothing happened. Then, without warning, the screen flickered and surged to life. Far too quickly, as if it had been waiting for her. Cold blue light flooded the space. It overpowered the dim ceiling lamps, washing over her hands and her face. Her unease sharpened immediately. This wasn't a normal boot sequence. The system bypassed its standard interface. It opened a directory that shouldn't have existed at all. Raw drives, labeled with meaningless strings of numbers and symbols. Before she touched the keyboard, 3 encrypted files began decrypting on their own. The system lagged, glitched, as if it were fighting itself, resisting access while simultaneously dismantling its own safeguards. Liora watched as the first progress bar stalled, jumped forward, then stalled again. The file name itself began to change. Project 7743.dat slowly rewrote itself, one letter at a time. The movement stopped. Her father's surname sat on the screen, stark, undeniable, inside a folder that hadn't existed an hour earlier. A warning icon flared in the corner. Aggressive red. The system visibly stuttered. Corrupted lines tore briefly across the display, as if it were begging her to stop. Her chest tightened. Do I really want to know this? The question surfaced too late. Her hand was already moving. With fingers that trembled despite her resolve, Liora double-clicked the file bearing her father's name. The screen erupted into static, fragmented visuals. Then, it stabilized. A stripped-down metadata display. Black background. Centered on the screen, a familiar geometric symbol. The same swirling mark she had seen painted in the basement days earlier. The screen shuddered once more, then resolved fully. Hale. Omega. The words drained the blood from her face. Omega. The word carried weight she didn't yet understand, but it felt final, like an ending or a designation meant for something expendable. Her heart lurched, skipped painfully against her ribs. She grabbed the edge of the desk, knuckles whitening, trying to ground herself, while the truth fractured everything she thought she knew about her father. Her breathing turned shallow, uneven. For a single, impossible heartbeat, the stale archive air shifted. Dark pine, heat, ozone. Damian's scent bled into the room, sharp, unmistakable. Then it vanished, as quickly as it had appeared. Liora twisted in her chair, scanning the shadowed stacks behind her, empty. The scent was gone. Only the hum of the terminal remained, and the echo of her own fear. Then the air thickened again. She didn't hear footsteps. She didn't hear a door. The first warning was the sudden weight pressing down on the space behind her, followed by a sharp metallic cologne that overwhelmed the archive's dust and paper. Marcus stood there. He appeared at her back as if he had always been there. One hand rested lightly on the back of her chair. Liora jolted, hard enough that her breath caught painfully in her throat, the instinctive shock snapping immediately into rigid control. His position blocked her exit. His presence closed the space around the terminal. She shifted subtly, angling her body to shield the screen, fear flaring that he already knew what she had seen. His touch was light, possessive. He waited until she looked up at him. "Find anything interesting, Liora?" His voice was casual, almost amused. "What do you think you accessed?" His smile widened, warm in a way that didn't reach his eyes. These archives can be deceptive. She kept her gaze on the screen, forced her expression into practiced neutrality, confusion, ignorance, anything but recognition. She couldn't let him see that she'd read the name, the title, the word Omega. Marcus's patience thinned. Without glancing at the keyboard, he reached past her and tapped a few keys. 2 of the 3 decrypted files vanished instantly. The terminal emitted a faint hiss as the directory collapsed. The sound small but violent in the quiet room. The disappearance hit her like a gunshot. She didn't need confirmation to know what had happened. An administrative override. His credentials. Marcus straightened, satisfaction sharpening his smile. There, he said lightly, gesturing to the remaining file. Some histories are better left sealed. Her fear cooled, hardened into something tighter, controlled. Anger. He wasn't just stopping her. He was erasing evidence. Before she could respond, the silence shattered. The sound didn't exist in the room. It detonated inside her head. A child screaming, high, desperate, raw. The echo ricocheted through her skull, carrying the scent of burning wood and rain. Liora gasped, clutching at her temples as the sensation overwhelmed her. She couldn't breathe. The memory wasn't hers, yet it felt real, unfiltered terror wrapped in decades of repression. A child had been there the night her father died. Her hands tightened painfully against her scalp. She forced out a hoarse whisper, not to Marcus, but to the echo itself. "Who were you?" Marcus's smile faltered. The change was subtle, a minute tightening at his jaw. But she saw it. Instantly, his demeanor shifted. Predator gave way to practiced concern. He stepped closer, leaned over her shoulder until his cologne dominated the air. His voice dropped into a controlled, intimate register. His hand settled on her shoulder. Cold, measured, not comforting. "Your father kept secrets you're not ready for," he said gently, the words shaped to sound protective. Liora forced her breathing to steady, burying the raw vulnerability the memory had exposed. "Don't give him anything." She stared straight ahead at the terminal, at the single file he had allowed to remain. Marcus's eyes flicked to the screen, verifying control. Satisfied, he squeezed her shoulder once more and stepped away. She waited, until the archive door clicked shut, until his footsteps faded down the corridor. Only then did the tension snap into resolve. Fear still whispered caution, but the echo of the child's scream had burned through her hesitation. She reopened the remaining encrypted file. Omega. The system resisted, lagging, glitching, throwing corrupted frames across the screen. She pushed through. The file finally loaded, not as text, as an image. Her father's face filled the screen, younger than she remembered. Clear, real. Beneath the photograph, centered in stark white text, was a single label. Subject. The air left her lungs. This wasn't a personnel file. It wasn't an archive record. It was proof of experimentation. The screen shuddered again. External interference flickered at the edges. Marcus's deletions still clawing at the system. Cold blue light sharpened across her features as the file continued loading. A second image began to form, and the screen tore violently into static. The data ripped itself apart as the system made one final attempt to retrieve what someone desperately didn't want her to see.